The O2F Football Podcast. The voices of tomorrow, here today.
Hey guys, welcome back to the O2F Football Podcast. I'm Nathan. I'm joined today by Kieran and Jamie.
Hello.
Hi, mate.
We are going to switch up a bit today. We're going to discuss everything EFL from Championship, League One and League Two. So let's get into it.
So you may have noticed that Ollie is absent today from the podcast, and that's because we've decided to bring in someone else who's a contributor to the website, Jamie Cameron. Hello, how are you?
Hi, I'm good, thanks. Good to be on the podcast for the first time. Looking forward to it.
Jamie is, how you say, a bit of an EFL expert. So we thought for this EFL specific podcast, we would bring him in for it. So Jamie, as the guest, we are going to start with you. What is the thing you'd like to bring up, all things EFL related?
Well, it's been a bit of a talking point recently. Obviously, November international break is normally sacking season. We've had a few in the EFL, and we've had a pretty big one. One of the biggest clubs struggling, and that's Derby. Made the decision to sack Philip Cocu. Fair say it hasn't really worked for him. Quite a big name coming in at the start of last season. Showed a bit of promise at the end of last season when they went on quite a good run. But you could probably say that they were never really firing on all cylinders. They were just doing a bit better at getting more results. At the start of this season, it's been a bit of a disaster, really. To be fair, they've only scored one goal from open play, and the only results they have got have been from free kicks from either Wayne Rooney or Martin Waghorn. So without that individual quality, they've been struggling big time.
Yeah, Derby have been a weird one this season. I went to a lot of Derby games last season, obviously being in the area, and a lot of the time they'd win. You'd never leave Derby being like, oh, that was such a great performance. They were so good today. But they'd normally get the job done. And maybe it's one of these things where some teams just really struggle behind closed doors without the fans there. Derby have a pretty decent atmosphere. So maybe just because there's a lack of atmosphere. When you watch Derby, it's very flat. I remember watching the Barrow game, first game of the season. It was just so flat. Just nothing was happening there. So I'm not surprised, to be fair now, that he's been sacked, because it's not fun to watch. When it's like just passing sideways, it's all good having possession, but when you're passing it sideways, there's not really any point. But it's a weird one where Derby go from here with the new owners and stuff. I mean, I've looked at it. I've got the Sky Bet odds on me now. Obviously, other bookies are available, but you've got Wayne Rooney, who's obviously at the club now, is the interim manager. You've got Rafael Benitez, which, I mean, that's nonsense. And you've got John Terry, Steve Cooper, Sam Allardyce, Eddie Howe, Danny Cowley. I mean, some of the names there are completely untested at this level, at management at all. So I don't know. Kieran, if you've got any idea who could be a good replacement for Cocu?
I mean, I really don't know. I don't know where sort of Derby go from here, just based on the fact that in the last couple of years they have been the nearly team, haven't they? They really have. The amount of playoff finals or playoff semi-finals that Derby will have been in and either lost or come out losing in the semi-final leg. It just never seems to really go their way, and they've lost, a lot of good players that they had. I remember, Will Hughes was there for a while, and he was a very important player for them. And you think back to losing Lampard as well, that probably didn't help. They had all the youngsters come in and do really well for them. I think they should have, if they were going to actually remove themselves from this sort of paradox they find themselves in, they should have been promoted when Lampard was in charge, and they lost the final to Villa. But it's weird. It's like Derby have stayed in this middle sort of ground for so long that now, because they're like, oh, we're happy here in this sort of area, they haven't then tried to progress further and take that next step into either getting promoted or staying in division, and now they're going backwards. So I mean, it really is worrying times for Derby, and I think a lot will rest on the manager they bring in. In terms of who they bring in, I really don't know at the moment. It just seems like a club that doesn't really have too much of an identity or an idea of where they're going. There's no doubt they have some very good players in their team, but I just look at them and I think as if I was a manager, would I really want to go there?
Yeah, like you said, Nathan, it's quite a mix of names on the list of bookies' favourites to get the job. I think some of that's down to well, I'm not 100% sure if it's gone through, but the change of ownership at the moment. I think the main stakeholder in that is actually related to Sheikh Mansour, who owns Man City. So there's clearly a bit of money on the way, which is maybe why the likes of Rafa Benitez are on the shortlist. Although that still seems a bit far-fetched to me that he'd go to the bottom of the Championship. But yeah, it's an interesting one who they get in. Obviously, Rooney's in charge at the moment. He knows the club well, but do you stick him in the deep end? And well, they're in a relegation battle at the moment. So he's working with Liam Rossini, who I rate quite highly. He always impressed me when he was a pundit on Sky. So I think he'd do quite a good job if he was assistant to someone slightly more experienced, like Eddie Howe maybe. But yeah, it's quite a difficult one, difficult to judge with the position that they're in.
Yeah, there's so many choices to make. It's such a risk. It's kind of similar to Sheffield Wednesday's situation. Obviously, they've gone with Pulis now, but do they go for a young, either untested, completely untested, or someone that's not been at that level yet, like a Ryan Lowe type, or do they go with that experience that's going to guarantee them survival? I mean, I see Sam Allardyce, but I think that's unlikely. But I mean, Eddie Howe, despite kind of being young for a manager, he's very experienced. He's put so many games he's been in charge of before. So, or Paul Cook, someone again, he's in that kind of bracket where he's not particularly, no one's writing him off as an old manager, but he's been about for a long time. So it's a really interesting decision, because Derby make the wrong decision here. That there's a chance they're down, and I don't think anyone really expect to see Derby in League One. Ever since, I don't think there's really been a time in a while where people have gone on Derby, they're relegation favourites. There's a lot of talent in that squad. Louis Sibley is someone I rate really highly. Obviously, they lost their fullbacks to Sheffield United. That was obviously not great for them. But when there's still holes in that squad, there's obviously a reason why they're bottom. But there's holes in their striker. They've never had an out-and-out striker for a while. Jack Marrick's all right. Martin Waghorn's all right, but he's more of a winger. Rooney obviously probably is a bit too slow now to play up front or dictates the game centrally. So I mean, there's definitely holes in that squad, and whoever comes in has to do a good job with recruitment in January, whether they're in charge of that or get someone in who's good at recruitment. It's definitely a really important time for Derby. Is there any names that come to mind that you would pick for the Derby role, Jamie Kieran?
Personally, I'd probably try and get in someone like Eddie Howe, because he's been there and done it. That Bournemouth team that won the Championship a few years ago, they're probably one of the best teams the Championship's seen in recent years. So he could definitely get them playing the right way. But like you say, they've lost a lot of key players, and they sort of need a more out-and-out striker. I think like Waghorn's doing okay. He'll probably get 10, 12 goals, and he's scored a couple already this season, which has saved them a little bit. But they need someone who's got good contacts in the transfer market, because they're definitely going to need that in January. So yeah, at the moment I'd probably lean towards Eddie Howe, but I really wouldn't be surprised if they gave Rooney the job, threw him in at the deep end. Although personally, I don't think that would be the right decision.
It's going to be an interesting scenario, I think, because whoever they bring in, it's going to sort of define either the next season or the next few seasons. It's whether they go with someone like Eddie Howe, who may not be in the best place to go there as someone who likes to implement his style of football. It's whether or not you go for someone who's that quick buffer, plaster over a exploding tank of water kind of manager who just will keep them up. It's early days and everything, but there's no denying they are bottom of the league, and that is quite worrying. So it's going to be about whether you go for someone who will be that short-term fix, or you take a chance and hope that whoever you do bring in with aims for the long term can save you in the short term as well, and then further build on that going forward. But I'm excited to see where it goes, and I didn't think that we would be talking about this. I see Derby as a very much Championship team. I don't think I can imagine them in either the League One or the Premier League. So I didn't think that they would be going down. I thought maybe they would struggle at times, but I never thought they would be in this position here. but this is where they find themselves now, and I guess whoever comes in charge, it's about getting them out of this situation.
So moving into League One, there's a team in there that interests me quite a lot there, and it's Sunderland, because I mean we all know Sunderland, growing up Sunderland, Premier League side. I mean they're always fighting for survival. They'd somehow stay up, and then so they went down, and then they went down again. You have the documentary Sunderland Dies. So it's a club that generates quite a lot of interest across the country, but they're in a really weird situation now with Phil Parkinson in particular and how their season started. Because at one point Sunderland were near the top of the league, one of the most efficient teams in the league. They'd play boring football. They'd win games 1-0, 2-0, no problem. And I suppose when you're doing that, there's nothing wrong with that, you know, because you're winning. The ends justify the means, even if the football is boring to watch. But recently, they've kind of had a bit of a fall. I mean, they've got a couple wins in the last few games, but they got held away at Rochdale. And then they lost in the cup to Mansfield, which was a pretty bad result, losing to a team that were really struggling in the league below, regardless of new manager or not. And then the loss to MK Dons this weekend seemed to spark a lot of conversation on social media. I follow a few Sunderland pages on social media, and a lot of them seem unison of they don't want Phil Parkinson there. But if you look at the table, they're not that far off it. They're 7th in the league. They're just outside the playoffs. They're 3 points off Hull in second, 4 points off Peterborough in first. I mean, it's a weird situation for Sunderland. Do you think they stick with Parkinson and in this weird, like, we're not very good but we're winning games, or do they stop before the rot happens? And if they do go on a bad run of form, you then got a bad style of football, you're losing games. So where does Sunderland go?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. Like you say, obviously their fans sort of think they have this divine right to be like at the top of League One, beating everyone 5-0, and it hasn't really gone that way. This is their 3rd year in League One, and they've always sort of been there and thereabouts in the mix for like the top 6. But yeah, I'm not really sure Phil Parkinson is the man that they need to get into the automatic promotion places. Like they obviously splashed the cash on Will Grigg. That hasn't worked at all. They've bought in Danny Graham as well, so they certainly haven't held back in the transfer market. But yeah, they're sort of struggling to please the fans, really. Like you say, Phil Parkinson's not very popular with them, and I think either they can't really carry on like this. They need to sort of find a way of playing that gets them results and pleases the fans, because they're such a big club that if the fans aren't happy, then it's not really a good place to be around, because it's going to get quite toxic, especially if the fans get back in the ground at some point. So yeah, obviously Sunderland, they want to be challenging at the top of League One, but well, not just challenging, sort of top 2 really. But I think something's going to have to change for that to happen this season at least.
Yeah, it's a weird one. It really is, because you like you say, you look at where they are, and for an early start to the season, let's be honest, they're not doing too bad at all. And most sets of fans will probably take that. But as Jamie said, Sunderland fans seem to think and have the idea that they should be comfortably top of that league, smashing teams every week. But as we've seen over the last few seasons, maybe, you know, once every 3 or 4 weeks, they will probably come up against a team who just aren't as good, and they will play them off the park. But then sometimes it's not going to work like that. And we saw that with the game against MK Dons, a team that haven't won away from home in about 14 months, I think, something like that. Something ridiculous. It's been a long time for MK Dons. And that was probably compounded by the already growing disdain surrounding Phil Parkinson, in that Sunderland fans see that and think, how have we let a team come to our stadium that is, you know, really a Premier League caliber stadium, regardless of whether there's fans in there or not, and that might play a part. We've let them come here after visiting God knows how many other stadiums, and we've let them win. So that record that MK Dons had and that was broken at the stadium the like probably didn't help the already angry fans surrounding it. But I think something probably does have to change. You know, it's entering the 3rd season now, and I think you can excuse the first in that it's still obviously early days, playing in a completely different league, probably losing a lot of players who were at the club and going through those problems with the higher ups. But moving into the second and third, you think that they should be up there pretty comfortably challenging. So I think something does have to happen. It's just a question of what does happen now for Sunderland.
It's a weird one because, I mean, winning games is great, and I feel like, but football at the end of the day is entertainment to a lot of people. I know it's an elite level sport, but people want to be entertained. If you watch a football match, especially in these circumstances, you're paying a tenner to watch it on your laptop. And if you're watching this and going, this is dull, then you kind of can sense the anger. So I always feel like a bad play style is like a fuel to the fire if you get a few bad results. Kind of, I say, when Pulis is in charge of any club, that it starts to go wrong, people go crazy. There's an exit fine. It kind of happened in Tisdale's last season as well. But I look at their team. I've just got their team up that played against MK Dons, and I mean, there's again, it's similar with the Derby thing. There's just problems in the team. A team that is fighting for promotion shouldn't have. I mean, I don't know. I think they've had a few injury problems at centre back, but they've got Luke O'Nien playing at centre back in a back three. Who, I mean, he came in Sunday as a central midfielder, ended up at right back, is now at centre back. I mean, that's very much square pegs to fit round holes. And you've got Lyndon Gooch playing right wing back. I know Lyndon Gooch actually quite a decent player, but again, kind of out of position. The midfield three of Scowen, Ledbit and Powell, there's not a lot of creativity there. Chris Maguire's a huge miss to them with injury. You could argue they're almost too reliant on him for any sort of creative spark in that side. And then the real problem is when you look up front. I mean, Charlie White, to be fair to him, has got some goals this season and has been kind of there for 4 and 11. It's been for Charlie White. I mean, so he's kind of scored goals, but then you've got Will Grigg next to him. I don't know if you saw his miss against MK Dons. It is so bad. And that's a striker with absolutely no confidence. I'm sure that Will Grigg is a good player. Everyone knows this, but yeah, it's just just a complete lack of confidence. Danny Graham hasn't particularly hit the ground running at Sunderland and didn't particularly hit it when he was there before. And then the only other option really, to my knowledge, is Aidan O'Brien, who's more of a winger that can play up front more than an out-and-out striker. So, I mean, Sunderland look at their squad? I mean, is this not just Parkinson's fault? Is this the recruitment as well? It's been poor recruitment from Sunderland.
Yeah.
Has it?
Yeah, I think there's definitely some questions to be asked on the recruitment. It's still a decent enough squad, but there's definitely some gaps there. Like they can't really be going into a game against MK Dons, one of the best passing teams in the league, with a midfield three of Ledbetter, Power, and Scowen, which is sort of three more defensive-minded players really. And yeah, I think they need to look at the squads. They're probably still going to have a chance of being in and around it because, as with the last couple of years, it looks really close. And there's sort of 8 or 9 teams who seem to be quite closely matched. But I think the squad does need looking at, and some of the signings they've made are definitely questionable. The likes of Will Grigg and Danny Graham, I'm not sure they're the sort of players that Sunderland need to take them to the next level.
Yeah, and as we say with Derby, it seems like there's going to be some answers that need filling in the next couple of weeks, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do and if the decision is made to get rid of Parkinson or the recruitment, if there is any in January, and see where that takes Sunderland, if they can push on at the end of the season maybe. Okay, so moving on finally with League Two, the 4th tier in English football. We focus on some rather negative things so far in regards to Sunderland and Derby. So I thought, let's go for something a bit more positive. We're going to take a bit of a more deeper, detailed look at the 2 teams that are currently, surprisingly, top of League Two in Cambridge United and Newport County. In particular, in Cambridge's case, a team that have been struggling since their arrival in League Two. In the past few seasons, looking at last season, they finished 16th. The previous season, they finished 21st, and then the season before that, it was in 12th. So a team that don't really know what being in the playoff positions or top half of the table is like. But a team that have recruited incredibly well in the summer gone by, bringing in the likes of Paul Mullin, Iran Boateng. Me and Nathan know very, very well from his time at Exeter. 2 players who are very, very talented for this level. And you look at Mullin, and he is been very good, to say the least. 11 goals from 9 games. Joe Ironside as well. They're both the top scorers in League Two at the moment. So a team that are very much firing on all cylinders. It's just a matter of whether they'll be able to keep up the pace throughout the season against the likes of, Exeter, Cheltenham, Forest Green, Colchester, who tend to be in those areas come the end of the season. So Nathan, are you expecting Mark Bonner's side to stay there, or can you see them sort of wandering off?
I think it depends on the form of their strikers, to be honest. I think obviously Paul Miller's doing his best Doyle impression and has got 12 goals already. It's been a fantastic start from kind of out of nowhere. Joe Ironside, someone that was at Macclesfield last season, again coming out of nowhere, doing really well. If they can keep Wes Houlihan fit, who's been one of the, been an absolute fantastic signing for them. I know probably legs have gone a bit, but in terms of technical ability, he is best player in the league probably in terms of technical quality. They've conceded a few times recently. They've been winning games, but they've been conceding a little bit. So if they can kind of iron that out, then sky's the limit for Cambridge. Really, they could go anywhere.
Yeah, like you say, it's been quite a surprising start, given that I don't think many would have expected them to be up there at the start of the season. But the form of Paul Mullen's been a revelation, really. Like last few games, he hasn't quite hit the heights that he did at the start of the season. But I think at one point he was the top scorer in the whole of Europe. So that's quite an achievement for someone who's never hit double figures in a single season before. So yeah, something seems to have clicked there. Mark Bonner's doing a really good job bringing the best out of the likes of Mullen and Joe Ironside. And I think they've got a chance of staying up there, staying in contention. But a lot of the bigger sides haven't really hit their full stride yet. Cheltenham are doing fairly well. Lost a couple of games though, and likes of Mansfield and Salford obviously struggling a bit, but they've both got new managers, so expect them to hit form. So there's definitely going to be teams that start to challenge a bit more at the top. But I think Cambridge can fancy their chances with the likes of Mullen and Ironside in brilliant form. Yeah, they've had a great start.
You're both mentioning that their strikers there for being sort of a large part of why they're up there, and it's fair enough reason. Their goal difference is currently at 16, which for so early on in the season is pretty staggering, and I'm pretty confident in saying it's the only double-figure goal difference in the league at the moment. But in terms of a team who aren't really scoring that many goals but are winning games left, right and centre, in Newport, a team that are currently top of the league, another team who you could say sort of floundered in the past few seasons. They've struggled last season in particular. I think they went on one of the worst runs I've ever seen. They didn't win in absolutely ages because the previous season they finished in a playoff spot, and the season before that they were still challenging, just in and around mid-table. But it seems like they've completely gone to the summit of the league now, and they don't really have an actual proper goal scorer similar to what Cambridge have. They've won so many games by a margin of 1 goal. Only 2 of their 8 wins have been by more than 1 goal. So that just goes to show that how good Michael Flynn has been able to make his squad at grinding out those wins. So in a league like League Two, where grinding out wins is so important, is that going to propel Newport and keep them at the top of the league, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's been quite an interesting one with Newport so far this year. You mentioned Michael Flynn there, and he's really changed the style of play quite a lot at the club. They're sort of renowned for being a more direct team in the last few years, set pieces, and they're passing the ball a lot more this year. Much better footballing side. We've got Josh Dean in the centre of midfield, who I think is a fantastic player. He made his debut for Wales the other day. So yeah, they've got some quality players, and that style of play change I think has really been the main difference for them. Not many people would have expected that to happen because they had a bit of a reputation for just scoring from set pieces and stuff like that. But yeah, they've got some. They've been able to grind out wins, and arguably it's been because there's been so many games. They might not have even hit their peak yet with this new style, because sometimes doing things like that, it can take a little while for it to bed in. So we might not have even seen the best of them yet. Yeah, Michael Flynn's doing a brilliant job there, and I think maybe even more so than Cambridge. I think they've got a real good chance come May.
I think it's a lot to be said as well. I look at the team that played in their 3-2 loss to Carlisle, and obviously they did lose that game, but Carlisle are by all means a pretty good side. And it's very similar to the squad they've had for the last few years. I think a lot of those names you'd have seen on the team sheet last season, you'd have seen some of them on the team sheet 2 seasons ago. Josh Labadee's a great player, been there for a while. Obviously, Josh Sheehan, as mentioned, is really good. Matt Dolan, Dimitru, Wilmot. I mean, these are players that have been there for a while. So I think we're starting to see Michael Flynn get the best out of this group of players that he has at his disposal. And I mean, who knows? As we've been saying, Jamie, this could be the start of something incredible. Or I mean, if they are grinding, they could fall off, but I don't think they will. I think they're definitely going to be up there this season. I won't be surprised if by the next season we're talking about Newport County in League One.
I think the fact that the both teams that are in the top 2 are getting their wins in very different styles. I think if you're looking at it from an outside perspective, yes, it's nice to score 4 or 5 goals a game and your strikers be in red hot form. But I think in a league as dogged and determined as League 2, grinding out those wins is so important. As I'd say Exeter are finding out at the moment, in that we're on about 5 or 6 draws already so far this season. If you turn a couple of those draws into wins, we'd be up there as well. So it just goes to show how important it is to get those wins. So I'm fully expecting Newport to be near the top of the league come the end of the season. Cambridge, if they can keep firing with Mullin and he can rediscover the sort of red hot form that he had right at the beginning, then who's to say that they can't push for quite a surprise promotion as well.
And that wraps up the 1-2 Football podcast. A bit of a different one, EFL edition this week. Thank you for joining us. Before you go, make sure to check out our Facebook at 1-2 Football and Twitter and Instagram at 1-2 Football UK. And take a look at 1-2football.com. It's some of the best articles right now in football media. I'm certain of it. And we'll be back next week.